For a true change of this evil paradigm in which we currently live, clear goals and deadlines must be known. To accomplish true change, leadership is needed, because masses without leadership are like vaporized energy, lost in vain. Leadership, on the other hand, needs to be righteous, spiritually founded, and hence unyielding to any earthly traps, threats, and other temptations one is faced with when he or she enters a battle with the system. Everything else, all other options, are self-deception and ignoring the reality of facing the structures of evil and darkness which have no intention of giving up their plans. Quite the contrary. When they see hesitation, lack of clarity, determination, and willingness to fight, they translate it as weakness and continue to tyrannize and oppress. This is the formula for confronting the world system led by evil, of which Croatia is only a small branch. An economist by education, a writer, a poet at heart, but a warrior, geostrategist, and socio-political analyst by life circumstance. Marko Francišković, a Croatian public intellectual, author and activist, now a two-time political prisoner of the Republic of Croatia, stepped onto the Croatian public scene as a columnist for a Croatian Catholic magazine 2 years into writing his first book back in 2004. Published in 2006, his magnum opus, The Croatian Book of Survival, Study of Statesmanship, established him as a dissident thinker and critic of the current paradigm. But even more importantly, what set him apart from everyone else was the vision he proposed and the comprehensive strategies for its implementation. The premise being, in order to be truly constructive, criticism must be paired with improvements or solutions. In other words, for one to have the moral right to want to bring down or change a particular system, he must provide the alternative, which is what he did. A complete guidebook for restructuring the government from ground up, covering all departments and bodies of government, covering all aspects of statesmanship from finance, education, health, defense, infrastructure, agriculture, technology, and so on, as well as proposing his ideas of specific policies for each segment. All based around the awareness of the existence of God and the awareness that each being answers to God first, as opposed to any kind of man-made systems and structures of power. I want to be a free person and belong to a free nation, and only God and no one else can stand above the national state. In that spirit, as one of the first measures, monetary sovereignty would be immediately established by banning interest, cutting ties with the IMF, and retaking control of the printing and distribution of physical money backed and tied to real value like food and production of goods. A true theocratic model, as opposed to the so-called secular democratic republic, which he described as a kind of religion that aims to falsely present itself to be above all other religions, claiming it's purely rational, objective, and superior, and forcing itself to be regarded as higher authority than God itself. The book goes into tremendous amounts of detail in each segment, with the sentiment of freedom, truth, honor, and resilience weaved into every idea. For start, full national sovereignty would have to be declared, and memberships from EU, UN, NATO, the IMF, the World Health Organization, and other such organizations that seek to undermine national sovereignty withdrawn, interest banned, and all debt annulled. I will never accept and bow to the UN, just as I'll never agree with the occupation of Croatia by the EU or NATO as legal and legitimate. I see Croatia exclusively as an independent nation. In any case, Croatia can be either independent or occupied. There are no compromises in this matter. Freedom is an absolute concept. You are either free in the full sense of the word or not free at all. You cannot be partially free. This is just an intricate name for slavery, and people like to fool themselves and, as slave or servants, don't want to recognize the cruel reality by inventing such names, contrary to logic and reason. As a rule, this is done then to justify our own passivity, cowardice, and lack of desire to fight all possible risky consequences of the struggle. Ideas of re-establishing full sovereignty, but also exposing the rotten fruits of the existing structures of power, made Marko Francišković a target, not only to the establishment in Croatia, but also a subject to international agencies quietly getting involved, like the CIA and Mossad, which are arguably only branches of a single tree. Up to this point, Marko Francišković is a two-time political prisoner in his own homeland. First, in 2013, when he was put away in a prison mental institution as a paranoid schizophrenic on the basis of his first book, which is not possible for one man to write, as stated in court by the psychiatrist who made the diagnosis. Adding on to that, during the search of his house, the police found and confiscated his personal weapons left over from the Homeland War of the 90s, which, combined with his high intelligence score he supposedly used to cover up his illness, made him a danger to himself and others. This narrative was used as a way to override the lack of life sentence in the Croatian legal system and make sure Marko Francišković was permanently put away from the public scene as the only truly oppositional leader figure. The plan, however, collapsed after the initial diagnosis got challenged by a different doctor and was ultimately refuted by the whole council, after which Francišković was promptly released. During his imprisonment, Francišković wrote a prison diary, which he published in 2015. Then, in 2016, he published a book of short stories, Epistles of the Great Teacher, for children before sleep and for adults before waking up, and a short book of poetry. In 2019, Marko published his fifth book, controversially titled Croatian Jihad, Aryan Journey from Postmodernism to Pre-Revelation, a love travelogue of sort that discusses a new angle of strategy for dealing with the encroaching New World Order agenda. All of his books deal with the topics of history, geopolitics, social commentary and theology, and are, in a way, connected by a clear goal of struggling in the way of God by resisting evil and doing good. As Marko Francišković began promoting his fifth book, he continued regularly publishing content online, podcast interviews, as well as his own content, which he published on several subsequent channels, regularly battling with YouTube censorship. In 2021, another opportunity for the regime to eliminate Marko Francišković arose when Marko got cheered onto the stage to speak at the biggest political protest in modern Croatian history, despite being explicitly banned from speaking by the regime-controlled protest organizers. This broke through the thick wall of censorship Francišković was under for years and established him once more as one of the leading oppositional figures in not only Croatia, but also Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. The events preceding and following the November 2021 protests all led to the arrest of Marko Francišković in early December of 2021 on the, again, fabricated charge of public incitement to terrorism. Finally, after 1 year in pre-trial detention, Francišković was officially indicted, and after 14 months released from remand, but with a court decision that bans him from using the internet to communicate to the public. During that time, the media started a fierce character assassination campaign against him, one which backfired as people more and more started expressing their distrust of the mainstream media and instead expressed their discontent with the unjust prosecution taking place. Regardless, Marko Francišković was still hated by both the left and the right side of both mainstream and the so-called alternative political spectrum. He never fit into either side and was often accused by every group of being whatever their perceived rival group was. This, however, only solidified the support he had from people who refused to fall for the divide and conquer manipulation tactics, and created a network of support across the region, across all religions, nationalities, and political categories. Now, officially indicted, Marko Francišković awaits trial where he faces up to 10 years in prison due to his supposed misuse of the internet for inciting to terrorism by no more than advising people to stop watching television, by promoting the free market and interest-based monetary system, for saying God's laws are above man-made laws, and for being dissatisfied with the government's handling of the so-called pandemic, which is all written into the indictment document in a desperate attempt to somehow prove Marko Francišković publicly incited attacks on government officials and destruction of public property and infrastructure, which prosecution failed to quote him on.